The city had never been kind to Rebecca Mitchell. It swallowed people whole, chewed them down into fragments of their dreams, and left them scattered among the endless traffic, the neon haze, and the pressure of bills that never seemed to stop arriving in her mailbox. At 35, Rebecca sat on a bus headed for the small town of Oak Ridge, her entire life packed into two suitcases resting in the compartment above. The divorce papers had been signed 3 months ago, ending a 10-year marriage that had collapsed under the weight of mutual disappointments and mounting debt. The financial crisis had claimed their savings, their house, and finally their relationship. The email had appeared like a miracle in her inbox. A small house for sale in rural Oak Ridge for only $500. She had stared at the screen, certain it was a scam. Yet something about the grainy photograph of the white clapboard house with its crooked fence and dormant garden had tugged at her heart. A place to start over, a place to heal. After confirming it was legitimate through the county records office, she had used the last of her savings to purchase it sight unseen. The bus slowed as it approached the town center. Oak Ridge looked like it belonged to another era. Brick storefronts with faded signs, a courthouse with a gleaming white cupola, and maple trees lining the main street, their leaves just beginning to hint at autumn gold. As Rebecca stepped off the bus, she felt eyes upon her. Small towns noticed newcomers. "You must be the one who bought the old Blackwood place," said a voice behind her. Rebecca turned to face an elderly woman with silver hair swept into a neat bun. She wore an apron over a floral dress, and her blue eyes were sharp with curiosity. "Yes, that's me, Rebecca Mitchell. Martha Green. I run the cafe down the street." The woman gestured toward a storefront with gingham curtains in the windows. "You look like you could use a cup of coffee before you head up there." There was something in Martha's tone, a hesitation perhaps, that made Rebecca curious. She followed the woman to the cafe, where the aroma of coffee and cinnamon welcomed her. Inside, a few patrons looked up, their conversations faltering as they assessed the newcomer. Martha poured coffee into a blue ceramic mug and slid it across the counter. "So what brings you to our little town? Not many city folks looking to settle here these days." Rebecca wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "I needed a fresh start. The house seemed like a sign." Martha's expression softened. "This town's been here since the 1790s. Lots of history in these buildings. The Blackwood House, well, it's got more history than most." "What kind of history?" Rebecca asked, suddenly alert. Martha seemed to measure her words. "The Blackwoods were one of the founding families. They owned that house for generations until Eleanor, the last one, passed 5 years ago. No heirs wanted it." She paused. "People here, they sometimes hold on to old stories. Don't let it bother you." "What stories?" Rebecca pressed. Martha glanced toward the door as an elderly couple entered. "That'd be the Thompsons. They lived next door to Eleanor for 40 years. The couple noticed Rebecca, and their polite smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. They whispered to each other, the woman clutching her husband's arm a little tighter. "Why is everyone acting so strange about this house?" Rebecca asked, her voice low. Martha sighed. "Listen, dear, every old house has its creaks and corners. Yours just has more memories than most. Eleanor was a private woman, kept to herself. Some folks thought she was hiding something, but that's just small-town gossip." Rebecca felt a chill despite the warmth of the cafe. "And what do you think?" "I think houses choose their owners as much as owners choose their houses," Martha replied, her eyes knowing. "Eleanor would have liked you, I can tell." When Rebecca finally stood before her new home at the end of a narrow tree-lined lane, the reality of her decision hit her full force. The house looked much like the photograph, small, weathered, with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. Wild roses had overtaken one side, their thorny stems climbing toward the eaves. The fence listed at odd angles, and the gate hung by a single hinge. Yet something about it felt welcoming, as if it had been waiting for her. "Ms. Mitchell?" A man's voice startled her. She turned to see a portly gentleman in a rumpled suit approaching, a folder tucked under his arm. "Reynolds from the real estate office. Sorry I'm late." His handshake was damp with nervous energy. "Let's get these papers signed, shall we? I'm sure you're eager to settle in." Inside, dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through grimy windows. The living room held a sagging sofa, a wooden rocking chair, and a massive oak cabinet that dominated one wall. The wallpaper, once floral but now faded to indistinct patterns, peeled at the corners. "The house comes furnished, as you can see," Reynolds said, his voice echoing in the emptiness. "Water and electricity are functional, though you might want to have them checked. The previous owner left, well, everything." "Who was she?" Rebecca asked, running her fingers along a dust-covered shelf. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "Eleanor Blackwood, elderly woman, lived alone. No family claimed her belongings." Martha at the cafe mentioned the Blackwoods were a founding family. "Yes, well," Reynolds straightened his tie. "Old family, old money once upon a time. All gone now. The house needs a new chapter. That's all that matters." As she signed the final papers, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that Reynolds was holding something back. His relief was palpable as he handed over the ancient iron key and hurried back to his car, not once looking back at the house. That night, Rebecca slept on the old sofa, too exhausted to explore further. The house settled around her, its timbers creaking as if adjusting to her presence. She dreamed of corridors she hadn't yet discovered, and a woman's voice whispering words she couldn't quite catch. She woke to golden morning light and the sound of birdsong. For the first time in months, she had slept through the night without the interruptions of sirens or neighbors' arguments. Something about the house, despite its dilapidation, felt right. The next days were filled with cleaning. Rebecca scrubbed floors, washed windows, and battled cobwebs, unearthing the bones of what had once been a charming home. In the kitchen drawer, beneath tarnished silverware, she found a stack of letters, their ink faded to sepia. In a bedroom closet, a broken wooden horse lay forgotten, its painted eyes still bright after decades of darkness. As evening fell on her third day, Rebecca struggled to move the massive oak cabinet in the living room. It blocked much of the afternoon light, and she wanted to position it against another wall. She pushed with all her strength, and the cabinet finally yielded with a groan, inching away from the wall. That's when she saw it. A rectangular outline beneath the peeling wallpaper, slightly darker than the surrounding area. Her heart quickened as she ran her fingers along the edges. A door, a hidden door in the wall. Rebecca grabbed a kitchen knife and carefully sliced through the wallpaper, revealing a small wooden door with an iron handle. The metal was cold to the touch, almost unnaturally so. She turned the handle, but it resisted. Decades of disuse had frozen it in place. With determination, she worked at the door, alternately applying pressure and lubricant, until finally, with a shriek of protest from rusted hinges, it swung open. Cold air rushed past her, carrying the scent of earth and stone. Before her stretched a narrow stone staircase, descending into darkness. Rebecca stood at the threshold, flashlight in hand, torn between fear and an inexplicable sense of destiny. She placed her foot on the first step, the stone cold beneath her bare feet. Whatever secrets this house held, she was about to discover them. The beam of Rebecca's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing stone walls glistening with moisture. The staircase descended steeply, each step worn smooth in the center from countless footfalls over what must have been centuries. The air grew colder with each step, carrying an earthy scent that reminded her of libraries and old churches, places where time moved differently. At the bottom, she faced another door, this one made of heavy oak banded with iron. Unlike the one upstairs, this handle turned easily under her touch, as if it had been recently used. The door swung open silently, revealing a chamber that stole her breath away. The room was vast, far larger than seemed possible given the size of the house above. Walls lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves stretched into shadows beyond her flashlight's reach. Tables scattered throughout held maps and artifacts covered in a fine layer of dust. In the corners stood wooden crates and trunks, some open to reveal their contents, others still sealed with rusted locks. "My God," Rebecca whispered, her voice swallowed by the immensity of the space. The shelves held hundreds of books, their spines cracked with age but still legible. She ran her fingers gently across them, feeling the embossed titles beneath her touch. Some were in languages she couldn't identify, their script flowing and ornate. Others were in English, though written in archaic forms. On a central table lay what appeared to be maps, not of countries or states, but of routes. Dotted lines crossed rivers and mountain ranges, with small symbols marking specific locations. Beside them sat a ledger filled with names and dates stretching back to the early 1800s. Rebecca's hands trembled as she carefully turned the pages. Each entry contained a name, a date, and sometimes a destination. North Star, Freedom, Canada. Some had small crosses beside them, others circles. The realization dawned slowly, then all at once. Underground Railroad, she breathed. This wasn't just a cellar. It was a station on the secret network that had helped enslaved people escape to freedom before the Civil War. The Blackwood House had been part of history, real, vital history that had shaped America. Her exploration was interrupted by a knock at the front door upstairs. Rebecca reluctantly closed the ledger and made her way back up the stone steps, her mind reeling with questions. Who had created this archive? How many people had passed through here on their journey to freedom? And why had it remained secret for so long? Martha Green stood on the porch, a basket covered with a checkered cloth in her hands. "Thought you might need some dinner. Moving's hungry work." Rebecca invited her in, grateful for the company and burning with questions. Martha's eyes widened as she noticed the open door in the wall. "You found it," she said simply. "You knew?" Rebecca asked, unable to hide her surprise. Martha set the basket on the kitchen table. "Eleanor was my friend for 50 years. Of course I knew." She sighed, settling into a chair. She was the keeper of the history, just like her mother before her, and her grandmother before that. "The Underground Railroad," Rebecca said. Martha nodded. Sarah Blackwood started it in 1832. She and her husband Thomas turned their home into a safe house for people escaping slavery. Over the years, they helped hundreds reach freedom in Canada. And all this has just been sitting here? Why didn't Eleanor donate it to a museum or university? Martha's eyes sharpened. "Not everyone values this history the same way, dear. The Blackwoods protected these records because they contain names of freedom seekers and of those who helped them. Even after slavery ended, there were people who didn't want certain stories told." Rebecca thought of the chamber below, filled with testimonies of courage and resistance. Why did Eleanor keep it secret until her death? "She was waiting," Martha said, her voice soft. "For what?" "For the right person to continue the work, to protect the stories." Martha's gaze was steady. She always said the house would choose. The implication hung between them, that somehow across time and circumstance, the house had chosen Rebecca. The thought should have seemed absurd. Yet standing in this ancient kitchen, with evidence of extraordinary history beneath her feet, it felt strangely plausible. "There's something else you should see," Martha said, reaching into her pocket. She produced a small, leather-bound book. "Eleanor's journal. She wanted whoever found the chamber to have this." Rebecca took the journal with reverence. Opening it revealed handwriting that changed over the decades, from the flowing script of youth to the shakier hand of old age. Eleanor had documented her life as guardian of the Blackwood legacy. Read it tonight, Martha suggested, rising. And tomorrow come to the cafe. There's someone you should meet. After Martha left, Rebecca descended again to the chamber, this time with Eleanor's journal in hand. She settled at one of the tables, flashlight casting long shadows, and began to read. Eleanor wrote of growing up in the house, learning its secrets from her mother, of how Sarah Blackwood, Eleanor's great-great-grandmother, had been part of a network of abolitionists who risked everything to help enslaved people escape. The Blackwood house, with its strategic location near the river, had been a crucial station. Sarah had started keeping records, names, dates, destinations, and collecting artifacts and testimonies, determined that this history would not be forgotten. Most moving were the excerpts from Sarah's own diary, which Eleanor had transcribed. Sarah wrote of the people who passed through their home, their courage, their suffering, their hope. One entry described a mother and child who arrived in the dead of winter, the child feverish and weak. The Blackwoods had hidden them for 3 weeks until the child recovered enough to travel. Rebecca read until her eyes burned with fatigue, absorbing the weight of the legacy contained in these walls. Just as she was about to return upstairs, a photograph slipped from between the journal's pages. It showed a woman standing on the porch. Eleanor, as a young woman, Rebecca assumed, but something about the face caught her attention. She held the photo closer to the light, studying the features. The resemblance was uncanny. Though the fashion and hairstyle were from another era, the woman had Rebecca's same high cheekbones, the same slight asymmetry to her smile. It could have been Rebecca herself in vintage clothing. A chill ran through her. Could there be a connection between her and the Blackwoods? Her own family history was fragmentary at best. Raised by a single mother who died when Rebecca was in college, she knew little about her extended family or ancestry. The next morning, Rebecca hurried to the cafe, the journal and photograph tucked safely in her bag. Martha introduced her to Dr. Eleanor Pierce, a retired history professor from the State University. "I specialize in the Underground Railroad," Dr. Pierce explained, her voice vibrant despite her 70 years. "Martha called me as soon as she knew you'd found the chamber. What you've discovered is extraordinarily significant." They spent hours discussing the historical context of the archive. Dr. Pierce explained how the Underground Railroad had operated, with stations like the Blackwood House forming a network that stretched from the South to Canada. The ledgers, maps, and artifacts Rebecca had found represented one of the most complete collections she'd ever heard of. "Most evidence of the railroad was deliberately destroyed," Dr. Pierce said. "People who assisted fugitives were breaking the law. They could be imprisoned or worse. After the Civil War, many records were lost to time or purposely forgotten as the country tried to heal. What you found is a national treasure." Rebecca showed her the photograph. "I found this in Eleanor's journal. The resemblance is strange." Dr. Pierce studied it, then looked at Rebecca with new interest. "This isn't Eleanor. This is Sarah Blackwood, taken around 1870. The resemblance is remarkable. Could there be a connection? My mother never talked much about our family history." "It's possible," Dr. Pierce said thoughtfully. "Many families are connected in ways they don't realize. During the chaotic periods after the Civil War, family records were often scattered or lost." As they talked, Rebecca noticed a well-dressed man at a corner table, watching them with undisguised interest. Dr. Pierce followed her gaze. "James Harrington," she said, her voice dropping. "Art dealer and collector, specializes in American historical artifacts." The man, sensing their attention, approached with a confident smile. "Ladies, forgive my intrusion, but I couldn't help overhearing. You've made a historical discovery of some kind?" His charm was practiced, but his eyes were calculating. Rebecca instinctively clutched her bag closer. "Just discussing local history," Dr. Pierce said smoothly. "Mr. Harrington, this is Rebecca Mitchell. She's just moved into the old Blackwood place." Something flashed in Harrington's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or anticipation. The Blackwood house. I've always been fascinated by that property. Such potential. If you're ever interested in selling, Miss Mitchell, I'd make it worth your while. "I've only just arrived," Rebecca said, uncomfortable with his intensity. Of course. But should you change your mind?" He handed her a business card. "History like that deserves to be preserved properly, in the right hands." After he left, Dr. Pierce's expression was grave. "Be careful of that one. The Harrington family has a complicated history with the Blackwoods." "What kind of history?" Rebecca asked. "The kind that leaves bad blood. His ancestors were slave owners who lost property in standing after the Civil War. Some say they never forgave the families who helped their property escape." Dr. Pierce gathered her papers. "The past isn't always past in small towns like this." Over the next days, Rebecca divided her time between restoring the house and exploring the chamber. She categorized artifacts, photographed documents, and read through diaries and letters. The lives documented in these materials began to feel personal to her. The fears, hopes, and extraordinary courage of both those seeking freedom and those helping them. The morning she found the small iron shackles tucked in a box of artifacts, she wept. They were child-sized, rusted with age but unmistakable in their purpose. The thought of a child bound in these filled her with both sorrow and rage. That same afternoon, she returned home from grocery shopping to find her front gate open and footprints in the garden beds beneath her windows. Nothing inside seemed disturbed, but the hair on her neck stood up at the thought of someone watching her home. The next day brought an unmarked envelope pushed under her door. Inside was a newspaper clipping about a house fire in a neighboring county that had destroyed irreplaceable historical artifacts. Along with a note, "History can be dangerous. Some secrets are best sold to those who can protect them." Rebecca took the note to Martha, who confirmed her fears. "Harrington, he's been trying to get his hands on the Blackwood legacy for years. Eleanor always refused to even let him in the door." "But why? What would he want with all this?" Martha's expression darkened. "Control of the narrative. The Harringtons have spent generations trying to rehabilitate their family name. The Blackwood Archive contains evidence of their involvement in the slave trade and their efforts to recapture escaped slaves. History written by the victors, as they say." That night, Rebecca sat in the chamber, surrounded by the evidence of lives risked and saved, of courage in the face of monstrous injustice. She thought of her own life, the failed marriage, the career sacrifice to support her husband's ambitions, the years spent trying to please others while losing herself. In the quiet darkness, surrounded by testimonies of extraordinary bravery, her own troubles seemed to shrink. These walls had witnessed real courage, real sacrifice, and now somehow she had become their guardian. She picked up Sarah Blackwood's diary again, finding comfort in the strong, clear handwriting. One passage stood out. "We do not choose our moments of testing, they choose us. And in that moment, we discover who we truly are." The crack of breaking glass shattered the night's silence. Rebecca bolted upright in bed, heart hammering against her ribs. Another crash from downstairs confirmed her fears. Someone was breaking in. She grabbed her phone and a heavy flashlight, moving silently to the bedroom door. The old floorboards that had announced her presence for days now became allies, as she knew exactly where to step to avoid their creaks. From the darkened hallway, she could see flashlight beams sweeping through the living room below. Low voices murmured instructions. They were heading straight for the hidden door, which Rebecca had left partially open after her evening reading. "It has to be down there. Find it." The commanding voice belonged to James Harrington. Rebecca slipped back into her room, frantically dialing Martha's number. "Someone's in the house," she whispered when the older woman answered. "Harrington and at least two others. They're going for the chamber." "I'm calling the sheriff. Stay hidden, Rebecca." But as she heard the intruders descending the stone staircase, Rebecca knew she couldn't just wait. The treasures below weren't just artifacts. They were lives, stories, a legacy of courage that had been protected for generations. Now it was her turn. She crept downstairs, keeping to the shadows. The hidden door stood open, light flickering from below. Taking a deep breath, she slipped through and started down the steps. She could hear Harrington directing his companions. "Check every box, every book. We need those maps in the original ledger. The Blackwood woman kept a journal too. Find it." Rebecca reached the chamber just as one of the men was pulling books from the shelves, examining each before tossing it aside. Another was rifling through a trunk of papers. Harrington himself stood at the central table, leafing through the ledger Rebecca had been studying. "That doesn't belong to you," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The men spun toward her. Harrington recovered first, his smile cold in the flashlight's glow. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm afraid you don't understand what you've stumbled into. This," he gestured around the chamber, "is valuable, yes, but also dangerous. Some histories are better left buried." "Or controlled by those who want to rewrite them?" Rebecca challenged. Harrington's smile faded. "My family has spent generations rebuilding what was destroyed by misguided idealists like the Blackwoods. These documents contain lies, exaggerations. They paint certain families, important families, in an unfair light." "You mean they tell the truth about who owned slaves and who helped them escape?" One of the other men stepped forward menacingly, but Harrington held up a hand. "There's no need for unpleasantness. I'm prepared to pay handsomely for these materials. You could restore this house properly, start fresh. Everyone wins." Rebecca thought of Sarah Blackwood, of Eleanor, of the generations of women who had protected this archive, despite threats and pressure. They hadn't sold out. Neither would she. "This history doesn't belong to any one person," she said. "It belongs to everyone whose lives are documented here." "I won't let you erase them." Harrington's expression hardened. "Don't be foolish. You're alone here, a stranger in town. Who will stand with you?" As if in answer, voices called from upstairs. Martha's distinctive tone accompanied by the deeper voice of a man. The sheriff had arrived. "You should leave," Rebecca said, newfound strength in her voice. "The chamber has another exit, doesn't it? That's how the fugitives continued their journey north." "I haven't found it yet, but I imagine you know where it is." Surprise flickered across Harrington's face. He hadn't expected her to know about the tunnel. With a curt nod to his companions, he moved toward the far wall, pressing against a section that looked identical to the rest. A portion of the stone shifted, revealing a dark passage. "This isn't over," he warned as they slipped into the darkness. "History belongs to those who control its telling." After Harrington and his men escaped, Rebecca showed the sheriff the broken windows and the chamber below. Though sympathetic, he wasn't optimistic about catching the intruders. "Harrington's got friends in high places," he explained, "and technically, since nothing was taken, it's just breaking and entering. A fine at most." But the attempted theft had galvanized Rebecca. The next day, she called a meeting at Martha's Cafe. Dr. Pierce attended, as did several other longtime residents whom Martha had identified as descendants of families connected to the Underground Railroad. Among them was Edward Thompson, who revealed that his great-great-grandparents had escaped slavery via the Blackwood Station. "My family's story begins here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've passed down the tale for generations. How Sarah Blackwood hid our ancestors in a secret room, nursed my great-great-grandmother back to health when she was too sick to travel, then guided them through a tunnel to the next station." Rebecca shared what she had discovered in the chamber, careful to protect the most sensitive information. Together, they formed a plan to preserve and protect the Blackwood legacy. Dr. Pierce would help catalog the archive properly. Selected items would be donated to the National Underground Railroad Museum, where they could be preserved and shared with the public. The most sensitive documents, those containing names that might still affect living descendants, would remain protected until all parties could be consulted. The house itself would need protection too. Rebecca began the process of having it registered as a historical landmark, which would prevent development or significant alteration. The hidden chamber would remain just that, hidden from public knowledge to protect it from treasure hunters and those who might wish to destroy evidence of their family's past. But even as these plans took shape, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The tunnel that Harrington had used to escape, where did it lead? Why hadn't she found it during her explorations? That evening, alone in the chamber, she examined the wall where Harrington had disappeared. Running her hands along the rough stone, she felt a slight difference in one section, cooler, smoother than the surrounding rock. She pressed, pushed, then finally leaned her full weight against it. The stone pivoted silently, revealing a narrow tunnel stretching into darkness. Rebecca shone her flashlight into the passage. The beam illuminated rough-hewn walls supported by ancient timbers. The air that flowed from the opening carried the scent of earth and water. Without hesitation, she stepped into the tunnel. The walls pressed close on either side, the ceiling low enough that she had to stoop slightly. The floor sloped gently downward, taking her deeper beneath the town. After what seemed like hundreds of yards, the passage began to rise again. Eventually, she reached another door, this one made of weathered wood reinforced with iron bands. It opened into a small cellar. Stone steps led upward to a trap door. Pushing it open, Rebecca found herself in what appeared to be a storage room filled with canned goods and preserves. Beyond another door, she heard the sounds of dishes and quiet conversation. She had emerged in the back room of Martha's cafe. When she walked into the main dining area, Martha looked up from wiping a table, her surprise giving way to understanding. "So you found it," she said simply. "I wondered when you would." "You knew?" Martha nodded. "This building was once the home of Josiah Green, my great-grandfather. He worked with the Blackwoods, providing the next stop on the journey north." She smiled. "I always felt it was fitting that it became a place where the community gathers, breaks bread together." The discovery of the tunnel completed a circuit in Rebecca's mind, connecting pieces of history across time. The next day, she continued her exploration of the chamber with renewed purpose, searching specifically for Sarah Blackwood's personal papers. In a small trunk tucked beneath one of the tables, she found what she was looking for: a family Bible with generations of births, marriages, and deaths recorded inside. As she traced the family tree, a name jumped out at her: Margaret Blackwood, Sarah's youngest daughter, who had moved west, according to the notation beside her name. Further investigation in Eleanor's journals revealed that Margaret had eloped with a young man her parents disapproved of. They had headed to California during the gold rush, eventually settling in San Francisco. Margaret had written to her mother occasionally, but the family connection had faded over time. Rebecca's mother had been born in San Francisco. Could there be a connection? It would explain the uncanny resemblance, the sense of belonging she'd felt since arriving. Dr. Pierce helped her access genealogical records, and slowly a picture emerged. Margaret Blackwood's daughter had married a Mitchell. The family had remained in California for generations, eventually producing Rebecca's mother, who had never known her connection to the Blackwoods or the small town of Oak Ridge. "The house did choose you," Martha said when Rebecca shared her discovery, "just as it chose Sarah and Eleanor after her. Blood calls to blood." In the following months, Rebecca threw herself into preserving the Blackwood legacy. The house was officially registered as a historic landmark, protecting it from development. Selected artifacts were donated to museums. with the provision that they be displayed with the full context of their history. The most sensitive documents remain protected in the chamber, now secured with modern locks and a proper dehumidification system. Harrington made one more attempt to gain access to the archive, this time through legal channels, claiming his family had a right to defamatory materials that might be contained within. The case drew national attention, bringing focus to the broader issues of how we preserve difficult history. With the support of historical societies and civil rights organizations, Rebecca successfully defended the archive's integrity. 1 year after her arrival in Oak Ridge, Rebecca stood on the porch of the now restored Blackwood House. The peeling paint had been replaced with a fresh coat of white, the sagging steps repaired, the garden replanted with heritage roses descended from the original wild bushes. Inside, the living room had been transformed into a small library and reading room, where local children came for special history lessons taught by Dr. Pierce. The massive oak cabinet still stood against the wall, but now it displayed photographs and artifacts that told the story of the Underground Railroad in Oak Ridge. The hidden door remained, accessible but inconspicuous. Only trusted visitors were shown the chamber below, which continued to yield new discoveries as Rebecca and Dr. Pierce methodically documented its contents. In the evenings, Rebecca often sat on the porch with Sarah Blackwood's diary, reading by the light of the setting sun. She had found her purpose in continuing the work begun nearly 2 centuries earlier, preserving the stories of courage, resistance, and hope that might otherwise have been lost. Sometimes in the quiet hours of night, she thought she felt a presence in the house, not frightening, but comforting. As if Sarah and Eleanor approved of her stewardship, the city with its noise and pressure seemed like another lifetime now. Here, surrounded by history and purpose, she had found not just a house, but a home. "We do not choose our moments of testing," Sarah had written. "They choose us." Rebecca had been tested, and she had discovered who she truly was. A keeper of stories, a guardian of truth, a woman connected across time to those who had stood for justice when it was dangerous to do so. The Blackwood legacy lived on through her, and she would ensure it continued for generations to come. As twilight deepened into night, she closed the diary and looked out over the town. The lights of Martha's cafe glowed warmly in the distance, marking the other end of a path that had guided so many to freedom. Rebecca felt a profound sense of peace, of belonging, of purpose. "Sometimes a house chooses its owner," Martha had said, "and sometimes in finding a house, you find yourself." Thank you for listening to The Secret House. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to hear more tales of courage, history, and finding your place in the world. Have you ever discovered unexpected connections to the past? Share your story in the comments below. Until next time, remember that history lives on through the stories we choose to tell and the truths we choose to preserve.